I think the biggest pitfall is people take money too early on. Why are you asking for the money and what are you using the money for? If there isn't like a good answer to that, then don't ask for the money. A lot of smaller brands operate at a deficit for the first few years. They're actually losing money. And so they need to raise money to keep going and hope to scale to a point where they become profitable. I hate that methodology. I truly hate it, right? Because to me, it's like a flawed concept of like, if you're not making money now, what makes you think you're going to make money when you're at 10 million?
Hey, Justin, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited to go through the various questions today. I thought we would come at things from the point of view of, hey, if I'm a brand, I already launched maybe a year ago, 2 or 3 years ago, what's next for me? What should I have in my horizon? What should I be thinking about? And I thought, obviously, with your expertise, your experience in this space, you're the right guy to talk to. So really looking forward to chatting with you today. And just, I know you've been on the show before, and there was a lot of information we went through together, got a lot of great feedback, but would love to learn kind of where you are now. Quick recap for those that maybe have not seen that first interview, just about yourself, your career development, your career path. Why don't we just fill the team in on that?
Sure. Yeah. So you can guess by the sweater here, but I work for Bloom Supply Inc. I'm the VP of sales there. And Bloom is really on this mission to create a kinder wellness world. And we make superfood lattes and our new line, Super Belly. That's sort of kind of taking over North America, and really fun ride. I've been there for almost 2 years now. Exactly what you said. It was about 7 million when I got there. We're trying to break into 20 million this year. Before that, worked in more of like a consulting role with really small brands, trying to grow them from $100,000 to million, 2 million. And before that, of course, worked with you at Vega for a number of years on sales strategy and sales roles. And previous to that, worked at like big CPG companies like SC Johnson or PepsiCo, Pfizer, things like that. So sort of got progressively smaller as I've gone, and trying to take some of those learnings from big companies and apply them to smaller ones so we can scale and grow.
And I've been seeing your posts on LinkedIn. I've been seeing Bloom's growth over the last couple of years, tremendous growth. It's amazing what you guys have been doing. So obviously to your efforts, to your team's efforts. So I'm sure they're very lucky to have you.
Cuts both ways, right? Great product. Karen, the founder, is incredible. Really good team. We recently added Dan Perez, who you might remember he might have joined Veg after you had left. But just a really good team. And sometimes, especially in sales, but I'm sure in all roles, it can feel like there's just a lot of no's and you're kind of in like this valley. And right now it just feels like we're riding a nice wave, and it won't last forever, but got to keep that momentum as long as we can.
Hopefully some of the people watching this will get some inspiration here. Maybe they're aspiring to be the next Bloom. And maybe we can kind of dive into some of the topics here. And I think the first question that I have for you is, typically when you're starting out, you're thinking about Amazon, obviously your own website sales. What else is out there? What's next for them? What do you think is what are some other channels or distribution channels that they can look at? What's in their future?
Yeah. So, people always ask, like, how do you build the perfect website? It already exists. It's Amazon. They spend a lot of money creating the perfect website. And you can get set up on Amazon pretty easily. To scale is a little bit more difficult, but to get set up there, usually for smaller brands, that is where they start online. It can be direct to consumer through their own website. It can be through Amazon, but there are a number of other, online retailers that I think are really, really great. So on the Canada side, one like well.ca was one of Bloom's first ever customers. We were sending them packs that probably looking back were a bit sketchy. Who knows, like how we were wrapping them and stuff, but fantastic there. They do a wonderful job from a brand equity standpoint. Sometimes what you lose with Amazon is a little bit of that like organic brand messaging. It's very like Amazon's the big guy, and you don't get the same benefit you would have with some of these smaller websites. So in Canada, there's great ones like well.ca. I think there's 2 buckets to websites that I would look at. One is pure plays and one is bricks and clicks. So a brick and click website is somebody like Walmart that has an extended assortment online, Loblaws, Fortinos, Target.com, like all of those websites, they have an extended assortment online. So you can get listed on their online platform and not be in line in the store. And then pure plays are just websites that exist that don't have brick and mortar locations. So the well.ca, I think, is one of the best ones in Canada. In the US, Thrive Market is absolutely fantastic. That is one, a membership, the right demographic, great for reviews. You can do things like gift with purchase to get your product into people's hands. But there's so many more, right? Like Rise Market's kind of a similar version of Thrive Market in Canada. There's Natura Market. There's VitaCost, which is owned by Kroger. There's a lot of different websites. The nice thing about starting with a website versus in store is like you can send in probably your current case packs. You can start slowly with them. And if you launch with like a brick and click website like a target.com and your sales are doing well, that would open the door to one day getting into the store. So it's a nice way to ease your way into that retailer as well. Most brands can't like launch and immediately go into a Target or a Loblaws, right?
Interesting. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, that makes sense. Just taking a quick step back here for a second. As your business grows, staying on top gets harder. And if I was your competition, well, there are 3 ways I'm going to get ahead of you. Number 1, outsell you. Number 2, cut you down. Or 3, both. So how can you circumvent and insulate yourself from all of this? The first is to increase your sales channels, obviously. And the reality here is that you've got one shot with these larger retailers, either online or in store. And you have to be ready from a compliance standpoint to play at their level and reveal your books. Well, that means sharing your specifications, your test results, your ingredient information, maybe sharing your manufacturing qualification process and other quality and compliance related information. The other thing, perhaps not so obvious, is that your competition is already exploring ways to cut you out. We're already seeing brands being flagged by Amazon so that the product is wrongfully delisted. Or maybe these competitors are submitting complaints to the National Advertising Division. Or in some instances, these competitors are sending cease and desist letters and having their legal teams go after brands for not being in compliance with FDA. And if you're watching this and saying, Brian, we have third-party tested everything. Well, I'm going to counter and say, show me your stability data or show me your structure function notifications to the FDA. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, and if I was the lawyer going after you, well, I got you exactly where I want you. The fact is that when your business is successful, the bar of compliance from a practical matter shifts. And what got you by before at launch is not what's going to get you by now. And it's important to know where you stand and what needs to get fixed today, which is why I recently launched Supplement Compliance Checkup, aka SEC, for the brands that have already launched and are seeing success, and they want to get a more accurate read of where they stand against FDA requirements. We've loaded it with our proprietary compliance vulnerability checklist, as well as a detailed walkthrough of specific protocols to handle recalls and customer complaints, all built from hands-on experience. And we've included other bonuses worth over $750. Check out the links in the description down below for more information to Supplement Compliance Checkup to make sure that your brand is protected and secured for long-term sustainable growth. All right, back to the video. How do people get onto these like Target.com sites? Is there a method or a way, the best approach for that?
Yeah, so some are set up as marketplaces. So you can set up like similar to Amazon, or you can set up as a third-party seller. Walmart.com is like this, where you can sell your products on their website right away. So you can go in, if you just go to the website, there's a contact me at the bottom. You can reach out to them, build your own profile, and actually start selling immediately. Other ones, like some of the pure play ones, you do need to pitch to them directly. But again, they're all really intuitive on their websites. There's like contact me sections. It'll direct you to the right person. They're super responsive. I think a lot in larger traditional channels, you'll hit like a wall and people just won't respond to you at all. The online world seems to be much faster in that case, and they are willing to assist you and try samples and all of those things.
Interesting. And you mentioned about pitching. We can just jump into that a little bit. What does a pitch look like? At least let's talk about this type of Target.com or Walmart.com at this level. What could a pitch look like if we wanted to do that?
We've all seen the Simon Sinek video, the Start With Why. I think like that is, you're great at this in your presentations, Brian. So I'm sure you can relate to this, but I think that is incredibly important. So anytime I present Bloom to any potential retailer, website, inline, whatever, the very first slide we always come across is our mission, which is the mission to build a kinder wellness world. That's where we always start, right? And from there, we build into, here are the problems that consumers are experiencing. They're having too much sugar, they're having too much caffeine, they're having GI issues. We kind of get into what are the problems that people are experiencing right now, and then you present them with the solution. I think people always say in sales, you're not selling products, you're selling a solution to a problem that exists. So start with the why are you creating the company, what the problem is, how your product fills that problem. And then from there, you can go into your specific product attributes and pricing. And usually on a pitch call, you're not going to talk about pricing. The buyer's going to want to absorb that information, come back to you, maybe try and squeeze you a little bit on pricing things somewhere. But really it's about like, how are you solving a problem that their consumers have? So I would focus it on that. And then in all the follow-ups, you can worry about the dollars and cents.
And now that's the .com side. What if I wanted to branch into stores, mom and pop shops? When is it the right time for that versus maybe I have grand aspirations going into Costco or Target?
Yeah.
Obviously, those are very, very different challenges, but maybe walk me through, if I were brand new, kind of what should I be expecting? When is the right time for the separate categories, the Walmarts, the Costco, and then the mom and pop stores?
Yeah. And I mean, we're not in Costco right now with Bloom. So this is something that we talk about all the time. That is, I like to call it a big swing, right? It can be amazing. It can be terrible, depending on how your product performs there. So I think starting out, what most people do, and I know Karen did this with Bloom, and I'm like in awe of it, is like store by store. Like it's really visiting stores, going to some of these independent stores that have the power to buy, talking with them, seeing if they'll bring in your product in your local geography. Mike Fata, who's one of our investors and is the founder of Manitoba Harvest and exited there, he talks about in your city, if you live in one of the major cities, like Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, you should be able to do $1 million in sales just in your city. So really think about like how deep you want to go in this city. So start with these small independents. Once you have 5 or 6 stores open, that's when I believe you should have a conversation with a distributor. Most of these small stores, if you think about a Choices Market or one of these stores, they have 1,000 products. So it's very, very difficult for them to order individually from 1,000 different companies. So they like to go through distributors, which carry a wide assortment. So instead of ordering once from Bloom and once from whoever, it's like they can put in one order to UNFI or one order to Purity. So I think step one, get a handful of stores in your local geographic area just by going and knocking on doors and meeting with store managers. And I know that can seem like overwhelming, but just start with that. And then once you have a few stores, have a conversation with a distributor. In Canada, it's Purity or UNFI or Indigo. In the US, it's UNFI and KeHE that do most of that. Once you sign on with them, one, you'll be able to service the customers you've already brought on, but two, that now opens the door up to their whole customer universe. And so they'll have a list of stores that they service. They won't give you the full contact information, but Google will find all of that for you. You can reach out to all those customers, and now you're available to at least start having those conversations.
I agree with you. I think start local is so important. A lot of people are maybe operating in the comfort of their own home digitally. They're not really the salesperson. That was never in their nature when they started the brand. But what's the value, you would say, beyond sales? But what's the value? What are the lessons or learnings one could have by just going after these small mom and pop stores versus swinging really, really big too soon?
There's a lot of them. I think one, like when you get into these larger retailers, cash flow and all these other issues become a bigger problem. But I think one, it allows you to test out if your product is any good. And so like you try with these smaller stores and see if people are attracted to the product, see if people buy the product. I'll tell you, doing demos, you at a store, you will get direct feedback like that. And they will tell you whether or not the product is good. People will be very honest, right? So to get that actual direct feedback right at that time and then making relationships with those store managers, I'm sure we all have local stores that we shop in, and there's some local brand that is disproportionately on end cap or display all of the time. And that's because they've made relationships with those store managers, right? So I think it's like you get the feedback, you test out your ideas, and then you can really like start to build some brand equity with these accounts that can be special for a long, long time. Some of our best like mom and pop shops with Bloom that we launched at the very beginning are still some of our best stores. So as exciting as it is to go into these larger stores, some of these are still the best brand equity accounts for us. And when someone goes in and they're everywhere, it's still really, really powerful.
Something that came to mind here, and maybe you can draw from either Vega or Bloom or whatever other experience you've got here. How about where does packaging fall in this? Because I'm thinking nowadays everyone's launching online, and selling online is very different than say in store, right? Because I think a lot of brands now are designing for the online seller or the online buyer, but not necessarily for the in-store buyer. Have you come across that type of situation, and maybe some tips around packaging or something to just be mindful of, and just know that you're going to probably be making some changes to the label?
I mean, we're going through a rebrand with Bloom right now for this exact issue, right? Like the idea in retail is the 5 seconds from 5 feet rule. Somebody needs to understand your product in 5 seconds from 5 feet. Online, that's not necessarily the case because you've got a carousel of 10 images and you can call out certain things and you've got a long description, everything else. So most people will start with the packaging online and try and make it small so it's cheap to ship, can fit in mailers. It doesn't need to have the same level of call outs on it. It doesn't need the 5 seconds for 5 feet rule. The case packs that you're using are probably completely different to what a retailer would take. So an example with like lattes, when we had those, there's a 100 case pack. If I were to ask Loblaws to take a case pack of 100, they would laugh at me. So I think from a packaging standpoint, the faster you can get to the 5 seconds from 5 feet kind of retail, I would start by looking at what you would want to do in retail and then launch that online first versus doing it the opposite way. Because otherwise you're building equity on something that ultimately you're going to change.
Okay, well, I'm thinking of another example here. I got one client. They're building up let me step back. They are very successful online. They've created several brands of supplements that have done very well on e-commerce, D2C, that type of thing, direct to consumer selling. Now they're thinking about expanding or creating a brand specifically for retail. Like they really want to go after that market. They're already thinking about expanding into like the Targets, the Walmarts. What are some of the key hurdles they need to be thinking about, or what do they have to get through? What are the hoops they got to jump through, knowing they've already got funding, they've got, they have an operation, they've got a team, but there's a part of me that feels like you would probably say to them, you're still not ready. And here are some of the reasons why. That's kind of where my question is going, but maybe you have some other thoughts there.
It depends. Some brands scale incredibly fast. Some brands slow. There's no necessarily right or wrong way to do it. You hear success stories like a Smart Suites that scaled wildly fast, right? Most companies can't do that in like 3 or 4 years. It takes a long, long time to scale. And so there's the cash flow stuff, of course, that can be a problem, but if they're well funded, maybe not a concern. Retailers have terms, right? So when you ship their product to Target, they're not going to pay you for 60 days. So right away, you've manufactured all this product, you've shipped it out your door, and you get no money for 60 days. So that's where cash flow can become a big problem if you expand too quickly, because a place like Target with 2,000 locations is going to order a lot of product. So now you're out hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're hoping that you can get by until that comes back. So concern number one, I think, would be cash flow whenever you're launching with a big retailer like that. Concern number two is if you haven't built up the demand, like the consumer demand in your product, when you launch at a big retailer, you're not going to achieve the velocity or like sales units per store per week that you need to stay on shelf. So if there's no pull, if people aren't going to the store and buying the product because they have never heard of it or never seen it or don't know where to find it, then you're now launching to a retailer that you're going to be unsuccessful in. You're going to end up getting kicked out of shelf. You're going to pay a ton in markdowns. And then you're not going to get back into that retailer. Like you really only have one shot. And if it doesn't work, you're probably waiting a couple of years to get back in. So I think it's important that you build this like external demand for your products before you launch in big retailers. Because again, you think about shopping in a Target, how many products are in a Target location? How hard is it to find one product if you've never heard of it? Like it's really important that there is this large demand. So when you launch, you're flying off the shelf right away, and Target or Loblaws or whoever it is wants to keep you and expands you. If you're not achieving success at small independents from a units per store per week standpoint, then why would you exacerbate the problem and go into a huge chain?
And these
Yeah,
huge chains, they expect you to do the marketing and advertising and all that fun
of
stuff. They're
course.
not doing that. Yeah.
No, they're not doing that, right? They have a lot of them have listing fees to get in as well, and that doesn't guarantee you a spot on shelf. But they are expecting you to come with a full 360 marketing plan, bringing people to their stores and doing all of that work for them. They're not planning on doing that because at the end of the day, if you can't do that, there's no shortage of people that want to get into Target, right? So there's a long lineup of people behind you that it sounds cutthroat, but like they'll discontinue you and bring in somebody else if it doesn't work.
And does that same pressure apply to the Target.com scenario that you were talking about earlier, or is it a little bit different?
It does not. It does not.
Okay.
And so I think that's some of the beauty of it with Target.com or Walmart.com. A lot of those are drop ship. So what that means is that you hold on to the inventory and you actually ship it from your warehouse versus you send it to Target's warehouse and they fulfill it. So because of that, they're willing to take a much broader assortment because you're handling the fulfillment fees instead. So the thresholds are much lower. Again, it gives you an opportunity to test it a little bit. Maybe you have 10 flavors and only 4 of them really perform, right? And so it doesn't apply to those. And that's why that's a nice way to dip your toe into those big retailers.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Talk about the buyers. Working with them. How do you foster that relationship? How do you get their attention? I think you kind of talked a little bit about that, about going online onto the websites. But then once you've established that, how do you maintain that relationship with them? Maybe you didn't get in right away, but for the future, maybe another time.
So I mentioned distributors before. Distributors or brokers will have relationships with retailers that can give you introductions a lot of times. I think one of the best ways to meet buyers is at some of these trade shows. So Expo in the US, CHFA in Canada, great way for you to meet buyers and interact with them. I think my approach is pretty simple with the relationships with them, is that people want to work with people they like. If you think about these buyers, they're probably on 20 calls a day, brands pitching them. They're very busy. So a lot of times they don't respond to you. It's not personal. They're just very busy, right? And so if you can create a relationship with them that doesn't feel abrasive, that feels like partnership, I think that's the biggest thing, right? It should be fun. You should be having a call with them. You should be laughing, you should be smiling, you should be working on things together. Ultimately, if they feel that way about you and not another vendor, and they've got an opportunity to have dinner with one of you at a trade show, who are they going to pick, right? And so I think it's like that. It's the likability factor. It's being a little bit less abrasive, more laid back, I think is super important. But then the biggest thing is just do what you say. If you make promises to them or you commit to things, you cannot back out of them because they will hold that against you. And so what you'll find as well is that these buyers tend to either move to different companies or move up in the organizations. You really do not want to burn a bridge with anyone, right? We have issues all the time. At Vega, we took a price increase. That was not a great conversation to have, super abrasive, right? But we're able to navigate that in a way that we're still close with our buyers. So I think it's doing what you say, committing to partnership with them, and then really just going out of your way to try and be kind, honestly. So whether that's, meeting up with them for a coffee or grabbing lunch or asking them, even if they say no, just asking them if they want to meet up for dinner or, Christmas time, sending them something. They're little things that we talk about fostering relationships, right? They're things that we do in our personal life. So the same thing applies to retailers and buyers, right? Is just treat them with kindness, I think, and go a long way.
You mentioned that you were working in your previous role with smaller brands, $100,000 in sales and moving upwards. What are some of the mistakes you've seen, not necessarily in that role, but I mean, maybe in general or other thoughts you have here with smaller brands trying to expand too soon or just general mistakes, overall? Any advice or thoughts there?
Yeah. Well, I think one of them, right, you touched on is expanding too quickly and not fully understanding kind of the consumer pull element of it. I think everyone wants to get into Costco. Everyone wants to get into Target or Loblaws or Walmart. Everyone wants that because you get that PO and it's $500,000 and And now you can say, we're in this store and it's this amazing thing, right? But it's not necessarily great news. There's a lot of brands that you see at shows in these stores that ultimately will fail and go out of business. We have some pretty big ones that happened in the last year in Canada, right? So I think you really want to be patient, make sure customer demand is there before you expand. I think that's probably the biggest one. There's also a lot of mistakes that can happen in terms of customer setup, hidden fees, who you're working with from a distributor or a broker standpoint if you're fully vetting them. Things like listing fees you want to be careful of. There's a lot of, when you set up a contract with one of these new retailers, once that is set up, it's really hard to change it. So if you make a mistake in the initial paperwork for a Target or Loblaws, trying to negotiate that a year or 2 years later is going to be very, very difficult. So you have to make sure you catch those errors early on. And whether that means you hire a consultant for a period of time to review it, or you ask people, that tends to be something that comes up again and again and again. And then there's other issues around like pack sizes. Make sure that it's a pack size that won't get you into trouble. You don't want to ship in too much product. There's things like guaranteed sale, but there's all these hidden fees, right? And that's why when I talk about Costco, it very much is a big swing. If you ship into Costco and it doesn't sell, you're on the hook for all of that. And it's a unique product or a unique formulation. I think that is another one too. A lot of times brands try and launch different products in different channels, and you just lose your entire scale of economies there if you do that, right? So you want to try and have similar products as much as possible in the channels. Slight differentiation maybe between natural and FDM, maybe pack size, but as much as you can formulas, you want to keep them together. There's a whole host of other issues, I'm sure, on the QA side and stuff that you would know extremely well, but I think those are the biggest ones on the sales side.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. It sounds quite extreme and but very important. Um, let's talk about funding. When's the
Yeah.
right time to look at someone to look at investors? When's the right time to look at investors? When is it too soon? Like, what are some of the pitfalls of that as well? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the biggest pitfall is people take money too early on. Like, it's the question, and this is like a Shark Tank kind of thing, right? Is like, why are you asking for the money and what are you using the money for? If there isn't like a good answer to that, then don't ask for the money. A lot of smaller brands operate at a deficit for the first few years. They're actually losing money, and so they need to raise money to keep going and hope to scale to a point where they become profitable. I hate that methodology. I truly hate it, right? Because to me, it's like a flawed concept of like, if you're not making money now, what makes you think you're going to make money when you're at 10 million and it's vastly more complex and you have way more people? So I think it's important to get your financials right very early on, figure out your P&L, understand that. Again, if you need to hire help, like fractional CFOs or consultants, those exist and are super helpful. I think it's important to just get your financials right very early on. And then I wouldn't want to raise until you hit the $1 million mark. I think when you're below $1 million, it really limits the pool of people that are interested in investing because it's so much riskier. But my goal would be to get to at least $1 million in sales and make sure that you're break even. And then that to me is the right spot. And if the reason you're raising is for to build excess inventory or build capital into the business, or sometimes people raise because they want people to invest in them that have relationships or advice, or kind of like the Shark Tank thought, right? They can help open doors for them. Maybe that could be a reason as well. But don't do it just because you're losing a little bit of money, right? There needs to be like a strong reason to do it. And honestly, I would try and hold off as long as possible and not give up a big chunk of your company unless you have to.
100% agree with everything you just said. There are some clients we've come across where they are seeking that type of investment right away, almost too soon. And it just gets messy. Like, that's what I've seen. It just gets messy. Too many cooks or chefs in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, you give up equity too fast, and you don't even know if you have a winner, right? You don't even know if your business or the concept is actually going to be successful. And it's emotionally, it's also very stressful for the owners. So yeah,
Yeah.
really good points.
Yeah, and there are, I mean, you can do debt financing, and there are other routes, right? It doesn't have to be funding and giving up equity. But I know if it was my company and my baby, I would try and hold on as long as I could. At some point, again, if you're bleeding money, then maybe there's a flaw in the business that you don't want to need to fix first.
Well, after you just scared all of us about all these fees and all these retailer requirements, I'm sure a lot of people are hoping that you're a consultant one day. And if you ever decide to move in that in the future or have your own business or helping other brands, let me know. But that said, I believe you have a great podcast that's available. Maybe tell us a little bit about that. And I listen to the podcast, but if you don't mind just plugging that in for everyone.
Sure. Yeah. One, thank you for listening, Brian. Appreciate it. It's very kind of you. I host a show called Hearts and Carts. It tells the stories behind the products that are filling carts and winning hearts. And so every few weeks, we like to have on a different entrepreneur, CPG professional, someone in the industry that can talk about their career, talk about what they've learned, some of the pitfalls that they've found, some of the inspiration behind what they've done. Brian has been on the show, so there's a plug for his episode. Uh, and you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of that. But some really, really amazing people. I don't talk very much in it, so it's amazing because we have these wonderful guests that do all the talking, and some of the journeys that they've had are wild. And again, like when we talk about learnings and pitfalls, most people have made some type of mistake during the growth of their company, and so I think it's helpful to learn from some of these stories and then use that.
You learn so much from their stories, and B, the other thing that I've gotten from it is you just see their growth and the progression.
Yeah.
So like some of the episodes you've had 2 years ago, you see how that company has grown since that time, which is really exciting. And you kind of are shared into that journey. You kind of learn from that journey. It's kind of cool. So yeah, if you're not, for those that are watching right now aren't plugged in, be sure to check out the podcast. I'll have the link in the description below. Well, Justin, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have you again. You're a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you, sir. Really, really appreciate it.